What I would like to do is not to analyze the peace process and the long rivalry between the Palestinians and the Israelis, but to try to give you an analysis how the Middle East conflict and the peace process is involved in Israeli elections, how it affects the elections from an internal Israeli view. And to understand how it works, I'm going to use many maps and illustrations which are going to be presented on the PowerPoint presentation. And then maybe later we will have some time for questions and discussion and the next. Now, this is the region that we are talking about, the entire Middle East. And here you can see Israel. I mean, this tiny place, it is a small country. Altogether, without the West Bank and without Gaza, it is roughly 20,000 square kilometers, okay, of the entire Middle East. And we then move to the next one. Now, this is a map of Israel itself, and yeah, okay. So this is Israel proper. Here you can see the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, and this is the Golan Heights. Probably it is the terms that you heard in the news, but the white one is Israel proper. Okay, now to understand how the conflict evolved, we do have to go back almost 100 years ago. Now, why is that important? It is important because of the way that the Ottomans ruled the area. Their idea, which was quite sophisticated for the time, was how to diminish internal conflicts. And to diminish internal conflicts, they, on purpose, did not recognize national boundaries and national identities. They acknowledged only religious communities. Okay? So they gave almost complete autonomy to religions to have their own affairs as long as they remain loyal to the empire itself and to the Ottoman throne. Now, it worked for a long time, very good. There were much less tensions than in Europe. But on the way, and then we move to the next one, it also almost ignored national identities, languages, and aspirations of the people. Here you can see the map of the Ottoman Empire 100 years ago. You don't see the nation states that exist today. I mean, the entire region was one. And then another one. And this was a division in what is now Jordan and Israel. So you can see that the names, no Jordan, no Palestine, no Israel. This is a map that existed. I mean, the administrative map of the Ottoman Empire, the districts. And they were named after the main cities, not. Now, of course, it affects the way that the Middle East looks today. But this is another matter, so maybe we'll get to that during the questions. But you see that Jerusalem was one administrative unit, and then you have another one over the Jordan River called Sanjak Kerak, and then you have in Syria, it is not one nation, and this was also true to Iraq and other parts of the Ottoman Empire. The First World War ended, and then the British were given mandate over Palestine. Now, that was given after they gave promise to the Jewish people to have national homeland in Palestine, as it was called there. They didn't say what is national homeland, and they also made promises to the Arabs in the Middle East. And then they were given mandate over the entire, what was then called Palestine, which is what is now Israel and Jordan. Shortly after they received the mandate from the League of Nations, which preceded the United Nations of today, they cut the country into two. One is Transjordan in yellow, and the other one is Palestine in the purple. And this was made in 1922, and this is the first time that it became electoral issue. We are speaking about the electoral process in Israel itself. So for the first time, it became electoral issue within the Jewish community in Palestine. Because until then, they thought that at least this entire area will be part of the homeland. And also parts over that. For the first time, there was a resistance for the division of what it was then seen as Palestine. The British mandate over Palestine was 30 years long. And here we have several maps that show you different solutions that were raised to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict over the years. And I like to take some time to explain what you see here. Okay? Now, if something is not understood, please raise your hands and I will answer questions, because this is very important. Relations between Arabs and Jews in Palestine were not very friendly. There were rivalries all the time. And it became to a point where the Arabs rose up, and there was the Arab uprising of 1936, which forced the British government to bring royal commission into Palestine. And the royal commission, for the first time, raised the solution of dividing the land between Jews and Arabs. What they recommended for the Jewish state, and this is the first one, the head of that royal commission was Lord Peel, and their recommendation was to give the purple area to the Jews and entire Palestine to the Arabs. Now, that area is about 20% of mandatory Palestine. What was offered to the Jews? The Jews, after internal difficult debate, accepted the solution. They wanted their own states. It was rejected by the Arabs. And it ended with nothing. The negotiations broke up just before the Second World War. After the Second World War and the Holocaust, in which 6 million Jews were killed in Europe, there was a question what to do with the Europeans that remained in Europe. And one of the solutions was to let them go into Palestine and create a new state. And then the UN sent another delegation, and they came up with another solution. And this is what is called the Partition Plan of 1947, which was accepted and endorsed by the United Nations. Now, the area that the United Nations was willing to give to the Jewish community reflected also the demographic changes in Palestine, and instead of the 20% here, they now recommended to give to the Jewish people with anticipation of absorbing the immigrants, the refugees that are going to come from Europe, 55% of the area to the new coming Jewish state. Again, it was accepted by the Jewish community and rejected by the Palestinian community. And that led to the war between Israel and the neighboring countries of 1948. That war ended up with the country of Israel, now after the establishment of the state, taking over 78% of the area. And this is the armistice line of 1949. So what we can see here is the different solutions that were very favorable to the Palestinians were rejected by them. They accepted by the Jews. It led to a conflict. After the conflict, the outcome was all the time that Israel became larger and with more area, and the conflict is unresolved. Now the last map is after the creation of Israel, and this is 1967, which we are going to come later. But again, another war, 19 years after the creation of Israel, and Israel was able to take over an area which was 4 times as bigger as Israel, the entire Sinai Peninsula, Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights. So far for the historic background. Another one. Now this is another look at the armistice lines, the same map that you saw in the last slide, the third map. This is the line that existed between 1949 and 1967, before the 6 Days War. Why it is important? Because this is the area that is now recognized by the international community as legitimate part of Israel. Okay? And the negotiations now over there, if Israel is willing now, Israel is holding now parts of the West Bank and the Golan Heights. If Israel is willing to come back to these borders, it will be recognized by the entire international community, including the Arab nations. The issue is now, since it is holding that area, what to do, especially with the West Bank. Now, since we are talking about Israeli elections, we are moving now into explaining the Israeli political system. And I do have to say that between 1949 and 1967, territorial issues were not part of the internal dialogue, and they were not electoral issue at all. If the Arabs at that time would have agreed to sign peace treaties with Israel, it would have gone pretty fast, because there was no political issue. But to understand how it became a political issue, we do have to understand how the system worked. Unlike many countries, there is no electoral districts. Now, again, if you don't understand me and you do have questions, please raise your hand. I feel much more comfortable if you ask questions. Can I go on? Okay. The entire country is one electoral district, which means that it is very, very representative, because each party gets roughly its share among the entire population. And although it is very representative, it has other problems, which we will see how much we can tackle. Now, because the entire country is one district, we do have many parties. Because if you do have 3% of the vote, you are going to get 3% of the representation in the Knesset. And as you can see, you can count the numbers of parties that win seats in the Israeli parliament, the Knesset. So if I count well, now there are 12. Usually there are between 12 and 15 parties in each elections. And it is also means that in such multi-party system, no party is able to win the majority of the votes. It usually means that the Israeli government is going to be a coalition government that is formed after the elections, and on the night of the election, it is not clear who is won. What we see on the night of the elections is the relative size of the parties, and then people start to make calculations what would be the next coalition. And this is the form of the Israeli coalition of now. Each bloc is representing a different party. So you can see it is composed of several parties that all together they do have more than 50% of the votes in the parliament. There is a single House of Parliament. Now, as I mentioned before, after 1949, territorial issues were not part of the internal equation. Divisions between left and right were related more to issues of economics, of social order, but not territorial one. It was accepted that if the Arab countries are willing to sign agreement, Israel would be fine with the territory. Everything has changed in 1967 when the war erupted, and I'm not going to analyze the reason for that war, but it changed the equation. Now, how that change affected the electoral map? You can see here that in all the electoral campaigns before 67, there was all the campaigns were won by one party. The biggest party is the Labour Party, which was then called Mapai. And Mapai had always a great margin from the second party, the second largest party. I mean, the numbers here tells you the difference in seats out of 120 Knesset seats, okay? So 27 here means that the largest party had 46 Knesset seats, and the second one 19, and the difference is 27, and so on. And as you can see, right after, this are the first elections after 1967, when the territorial issue started to affect Israeli politics, but the Labour Party, who then came as the party identified with the victory of 67, was still the largest party. It was the first time that the largest party in Israeli history was very close to having complete majority, and it has a significant majority over the second one. But this was the last time that the margin was that great, because the next elections were held after another war of 1973, which at that time was regarded as a defeat for Israel, and the margin was shrunk for the first time to 12, and it led to complete reversal and change for the first time in the winning party in 1977, and since then Israeli elections are very close. Okay, you can see sometimes the margin between the first and the second largest party is one parliament seat. So, but you can see it is pretty close until 2 or 3 months before the elections. it is very difficult to predict the outcome. These are, in that area, some pictures. We can move to the next one. And, okay, again, to remind you of the armistice lines of 1967, and then another one. Okay. Now, what change has the war of 67 brought in the picture, in the political picture within Israel? For the first time, Israel found itself with a great territory, controlling over the entire territory, but it also found itself with the majority of the Palestinian people. So if before the war, the conflict was regarded as conflict between states, the state of Israel and the neighboring Arab countries, it again came to the pre-1948 conflict between two communities. At the same time, Israel had what is called defensible border. It was much easier to defend the borders from outside attack if you see it on natural lines. The river here, the desert here, the mountains here. This was completely different strategic equation as related to what happened before. Now, this is a historic picture. Probably if you saw pictures from the 1967 war, this is one of the most recognized pictures. And here are the same soldiers in a photo taking 40 years later, on the same place. So the place remains the same, but the faces are different. Okay, and it tells you how, in a glimpse, what the conflict means. Now, and here we come to the what happened inside Israel. An unknown decision of the Israeli government, probably if that decision that we are aware of now would have been published back in 1967, the entire political picture would have been different. But it was not published. It was taken by the government, and they decided to keep it secret so they know what they have decided. They made a decision that they are willing to deal with the Palestinians. And not only with the Palestinians, but with the Arab countries. And if the Arab countries are willing to speak peace, then Israel is more or less willing to come back to the pre-war borders. But since that decision was not published, it affected the way that the Arab countries behaved and affected the way that the Israeli public behaved. And now we are coming first, you knew what to do it before, first to the Arab reaction. The Arab League convened 2 months after the war and took 3 decisions that are known as the 3 no's of Khartoum. No peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, no negotiations with Israel. This was taken as a very bad sign. And especially right-wing groups between Israel decided to create facts on the ground that are going to make it to later government, going to make it difficult to make compromise of giving up the land. And since then, debate over what to do with the territories is a predominant factor of deciding Israeli elections. And there were 4 basic divisions or 3 basic solutions what to do with the territories. The first one is annexation of the territory, giving Palestinians full rights, which means one state without national identity. I mean, at the end, this is what's going to be. The second one is holding the territories as deposit for peace and willingness to come back to the pre-war borders. And the third one, which was not officially adopted, but in effect, that served as the main operating guideline, is to make a territorial compromise, to take part of the territory and give back part of it back if the Arab countries and the Palestinian people are willing to sit and talk peace. Since then, electoral campaigns are decided more or less according to how the peace process is moving. In 1973, a defeat in the war led to, for the first time, to a change of government. The peace with Egypt in 1977 made for the time the Likud party that signed the agreement as a very popular party and a party that can deliver peace in the future. One more. And since then, also the political spectrum has changed. What we have seen, especially in the 1980s, is different divisions than we have before. Before, the elections ended always with a party, with a clear winner of the elections. In the 1980s, we had two big parties that the main division between them was their position toward territorial concessions. Small parties on the right, small parties on the left, and swing vote parties, usually religious parties, in the middle. Okay? This same picture came out 3 electoral campaigns in the 1980s without being able to decide the outcome of the peace process. The deadlock ended a lot after the Palestinian uprising of 1987, and it led to the signing of the Oslo Agreement between Israel and the Palestinian Authority and the creation of partially independent Palestinian Authority. But further negotiations broke up again, and it led to the second Intifada of 2000, and then again to the feeling in Israel that they don't have another partner. On the other hand, the Palestinians felt also they had their own disappointment that the peace process is not going according to their wishes, and then it led to another stagnation. Now, the second Intifada and the massive casualties led Israel to decide to build separation wall between the West Bank and Israel, and we can see the same. Another one. This is how the border that was open for more than 30 years looks now. This is the fence around the West Bank, and here are parts of the West Bank that there are blocks of settlements inside. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4 main blocks, with the idea that until there is final agreement, then the fence is going to defend the main blocks of settlement. But it also became clear that this cannot hold forever. And the Prime Minister of Israel, Sharon, who went on the ticket of a right-wing party right after being elected, has announced his plan to withdraw from Gaza Strip and probably open a new window for peace negotiations. The Gaza Strip, these were Israeli settlements, all were evacuated in 2005. The entire Gaza Strip was evacuated, and Israel returned to the pre-67 borders with the hope that it is going to lead to further negotiations. Sharon, who at that time was very popular, was about to win the next elections, and then unfortunately he got stroke, and since then he is lying in coma almost 8 years now, still alive. But he was prime minister at that time, and we move again. And the last round, this is a map that was given by Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Olmert, to the Palestinians in 2008. And it outlines a proposal given by Prime Minister to the Palestinians, offering a final solution. Now, this is built on the exchange of some territorial exchange, but on the rate of mile per mile, or kilometer for kilometer. The yellow parts are parts to be given by the Palestinians to Israel, and in exchange, Israel is going to give the red parts to the Palestinians in exchange, with a passage leading from the West Bank to the Gaza Strip. This proposal was again rejected by the Palestinians, and Olmert was defeated partly because it was rejected. His party, not Olmert itself, but the party, was defeated in the next elections in 2009, and which the current Prime Minister Netanyahu came to power. After the elections, the Palestinian came to Netanyahu and told him, let's talk, starting from this map. His answer was, it is no longer on the table. It was offered by the previous Prime Minister. I'm not offering it. Now, this brings us almost to the end of this lecture, and the question is, what comes next? There are two different pressures. One, most Israelis acknowledge that the current situation can't go on forever, and there should be a solution. Even the Prime Minister, Netanyahu, who is leading the right-wing party, told on many occasions, and even expressed his willingness to go ahead with the Palestinian state. On the other hand, there is significant fear among the Israeli population because of what's happening in the neighboring Arab countries. So any territorial concessions is taken with fear. We are not sure what would be the outcome. But the elections that were held this year ended in almost, I mean, if we look at the territorial issue, it ended almost in a draw between left and right, and we are looking for the future with hope that something good comes out of it.
Первый вопрос, профессор Hofnung. Спасибо за интересную лекцию. И очень подробная информация о том, как развивались события на Ближнем Востоке и вокруг Израиля, по территориям и так далее.
בישראל, במזרח התיכון.
כן.
И в этой связи вот мне бы хотелось узнать, как сегодня все-таки выглядят настроения в израильском обществе и в арабском обществе этого региона с точки зрения ожиданий мира. Все-таки это больше пессимистические настроения или есть оптимизм? И вот хотелось бы, может быть, если у вас есть информация,
המצב הרוב של האוכלוסיות הערביות וישראליות לגבי המשך התהליך הן יותר אופטימיות או יותר פסימיות, ואולי יש לך מידע?
и если можно, взвешенно, где больше оптимизма? В израильском обществе относительно возможности мирного регулирования или в арабском обществе? И почему, самое главное?
איך אתה מעריך, האופטימיות יותר שייכת לחברה הערבית או לחברה היהודית בישראל, ולמה?
Okay, I understand that you are going to translate.
Actually, I'm going to be an interpreter, but maybe if you can go.
Okay. Our population of Israel is probably the most optimistic and the one that is most affected by the negotiations, because for them, solution of the problem is going to achieve two aims. The first one is to have solution, peaceful solution between their nation and their state, which obviously is welcome. The other one is if peace is achieved, then their desire to have more equality and more openness among the majority in Israel towards the Arab population is also going to be achieved. So obviously they have a very high stake. So on the one hand, they feel very attached to their nation. On the other hand, they are also loyal Israeli citizens. And if you look at Europe, you can see that in some parts of Europe, there are small nations that are demanding their own independent states. This is not the case with the Palestinian residents of Israel. They don't ask for their own state because they say, we are Israeli citizens and we like to remain Israeli citizens, but please make peace with our people. Please.
President, thank you for the lecture. If we're talking about the Palestine and Israel conflict, I want to know your opinion about do the relationships of Israel and Palestine need some foreign interference in this conflict to
If they need interference?
Yes.
You know, it is difficult to answer because nobody likes to call other nations to intervene in their own internal affairs. I mean, you bring guests to your house, you're not sure when they are going to leave. It is a problem. Now, whether the Israelis and the Palestinians can solve their own differences by themselves, let's hope so.
Добрый день, я преподаватель университета. У меня два вопроса. Один вопрос как пожелание, второй уже дополнительный вопрос. Первое пожелание, нельзя ли вашу лекцию хотя бы в кратком переводе и с этими же слайдами выложить на сайте затруднение наших студентов, которые поступают на вашей лекции. Для нас очень важно точка зрения представителя ученой среды Израиля на проблемы, связанные и с Палестиной, и с политическим процессом, который происходит в Израиле. И студентам, которые слушают лекции по политическим процессам, политических партий, конечно, была бы важна. Вот это как бы первое пожелание, чтобы это было осуществлено. И второй вопрос, он больше, наверное, связан с сирийской проблемой. Может ли повлиять ухудшение конфронтации на территории Сирии на вот тот вот баланс, мир между Палестиной и Израилем?
Influence the balance between Palestinian and Israeli territories.
how much can it influence and how possible it is to improve the situation concerning Syria in this connection?
Okay. Now, I like to think favorably about your wish to have the presentation. And to answer your question, the problem in Syria is going to affect the peace negotiations. I would say that if a peaceful solution is going to be found to the Syrian questions, it is going to affect the Palestinian-Israeli negotiations. What is the fear of Israel is unstable situation in Syria that can affect the Palestinian people, and we have seen the process in countries such as Libya, Egypt, Yemen, and Syria, which it can be deteriorated pretty fast, and obviously it affects the peace process. Thank you very much for your attention.